But it's really nice. I enjoyed this little boat ride. Me and hubby on in Chicago. Down here by Navy Pier. About to go back through the river walk area.
Seems like we're doing good as far as questions, so we're going to keep on moving along. Take a look coming up to our right side. You see that pink building right there? That's actually the oldest building that's featured on the tour. It's known as the Fulton House. It dates back to 1898. It's been there a decent amount of time. Now, originally it didn't look like this because there were no windows or balconies. It was simply a giant pink freezer box. Yeah, it was basically a dry storage freezer warehouse for the meatpacking industry in the Union stockyards. This building finally went through a renovation in the turn of the 1980s, turned into apartments and condos. When the construction workers broke into the walls to add in those balconies, they found out that the 4-foot thick walls of the property were stuffed full of matted horsehair and cork, which was being used as early day insulation for that property. It was all frozen solid from spending so many years as a freezer box. They had no choice but to wait an estimated 3 to 6 months to completely thaw out the building, manually remove all the old horsehair and cork, and then replace it to then finally continue on. They got through it, and I'm also happy to say that all these new buildings that you see, the insulation is entirely vegan, and we call that progress in architecture. Now, in front of us here, you can also see this big upside-down pencil-shaped building. That one's known as 150 North Riverside Plaza. This is some pretty intense construction. I mean, you can see how it's focused at the bottom of the structure. Let's talk about what's going on here. Right side of the building is slanted open with just the glass that surrounds the lobby. That's because underneath, there's the problem with the Amtrak and Metro trains underground. The left side of the building is also slanted open towards the water because it's required around here. Now, today, there are strict ordinances that regulate that the base of your modern skyscraper has to be set back at least 30 feet from the river and reserved for public walking space and public river access. That applies to a lot of buildings you see in this area, so the only workable lot space is right there in the middle. You can see that exposed core, it's only 34 feet across. Then that's dug down around 110 feet to reach bedrock, secured down into bedrock by the use of giant reinforced concrete caissons. Then that's connected to a Y-shaped custom-made steel truss that sits at the bottom. And that focuses the mass to the core and keeps the entire building held in place from down below. Or in layman's terms, this is a really crazy building, okay? So, there's those L trains passing in front of it. So you can see how confined that lot space truly is. But yes, this building probably functioned properly with a lot of complex engineering. And this leads us to that issue of wind sway once again. Now, if you take a look at the top, there are no blow-through floors featured with the structure. Instead, it's using a system of inertial slosh dampers. Where at the top of the building, inside the roof area, there are actually 12 concrete containers that are filled with estimated 160,000 gallons of water. So basically, as the wind hits the side of the building, the water inside the containers will slosh back and forth. And as that happens through inertia, it pulls the building back towards the middle so it can even itself out and finally maintain its center of gravity. Which is pretty wild stuff, right? Now, something very similar is called a tuned mass damper, and that replaces a large solid mass that's connected to the wind to the top of the building. And as the wind hits the side, the pendulum swings towards a similar way. So whether you need that inertial slosh damper or tuned mass damper, how much mass, how much water, it's all going to vary depending on the skyscraper. It all comes down to structural engineers. That's why they have their jobs, to make sure that each and every building can function properly in the wind. That's an incredible design. It's by architecture firm Getch Partners. It was completed back in 2017. Now, Getch Partners, they have some more work featured on the tour here to our left side. You can see Bank of America Tower. Now, a lot of these newer contemporary skyscrapers, there are a lot of glass and steel designs. That seems to be the trend nowadays. But what I like about Getch Partners buildings is they are both great examples of how limitation breeds innovation. You might have heard that phrase before. Well, in the case of architecture, it means that you're always going to have these limitations. There's something under you, you've got to build around it. There's an ordinance you have to work around. But it's all about coming up with solutions and solving problems. In this case, you can see how they dealt with it. A 30 feet setback ordinance affected them. They had to come up with this design to vault up that third floor area to provide that public walking space underneath. And I just think both of their buildings along the river are fantastic examples of that mindset of architecture. limitation breeds innovation. Now, underneath Washington Boulevard, we'll have the chance to check out, well, a lot of people heading home from work, but also more Art Deco buildings. Here to our left side, this one's known as the Civic Opera Building, completed in 1929. You'll see these visual motifs featured throughout the exterior. Bottom left corner, a heavily romanticized homage to those Native Americans we talked about towards the beginning of the tour. A little bit further up, you can also see these alternating comedy and tragedy masks. That was pulled as inspiration from the Paris Opera House. But inside here today is the second largest opera house in the U.S. Seats right around 3,600 people inside the Art Deco Theater. This is the home of the Lyric Opera of Chicago, as well as the Joffrey Ballet. To our right, you can see, setting up for something. Probably a little concert or something going on. But this is known as 2 North Riverside Plaza. It was formerly known as the Chicago Daily News Building, recently declared a new Chicago landmark. Designed by Hollywood and Root, completed in 1929. Okay, so both of these buildings are completed in the same year. Almost like something pretty crazy happened in 1929. Well, it did. The stock market crash plunged us into the Great Depression, and things were not going well. Following that, into the 1940s, we're getting into World War II. So it's about 2 decades worth of time, with just not a lot of new buildings popping up in downtown Chicago. It wasn't really until about the 50s and 60s when we saw some new architecture emerge, but when we did, it was completely different than before. It's like you're no longer worried about extravagance and luxury with the architecture. It was more about just having a simple building at a good price point. So you see this general shift in mindset towards the modernist movement of architecture, which you can see here to our right side. And we call this specific style black box modernism. And honestly, what you see is what you get. It's a very simplistic approach to designing a building, because that was the whole purpose. Simplicity, efficiency, functionality is the main focus, instead of all this extravagance of Art Deco. So you see a steel frame, glass windows, boxy design, that's it. And it kind of got us through those tough times. Now, the father of modernism, his name is Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. He's really responsible for pioneering this style. He fled Nazi Germany, settled in Chicago, and then it really led to all these boxy office buildings popping up around town. And it led to, from the 50s and 60s with the black boxes, to then the 1970s with these white boxes. And that's known as international style architecture. So you're just looking at a concrete frame instead of the steel frame. It's the same general principle to designing a building. They can also be gray boxes, brown boxes, you get it. But that's 3 decades of the era of boxes. It was not really until about the 1980s that we finally see these architects breaking out of the box. That's when you start to see the rise of these new architectural styles like postmodernism, and also the rise of this new approach to designing a building. So this philosophy of contextualism becomes quite popular. You know, how am I going to fit into what's already established? Good example of that is to our back right-hand corner with Gateway Center 4. It's got that reflective glass, very reminiscent of both the sky and the water down below, with the curve of the building designed to complement the curve of the south branch of the river. That's one from about 1983. Then the one next to it here is the Mid-America Commodity Exchange. It has those X braces that you might recognize from buildings like the John Hancock. But we call that structural expressionism. Just think of the building expressing its personality through its functionality. So, honestly, my favorite part about this building, you can't really tell because it's all blocked off, but the fitness center is right next to the bakery, so I think it's a very nice touch. They're going to be in business kind of very well planned there. To our left side, this is 300 South Wacker, another one from the 1970s, but it's got this big concrete slab on the back side of it. So the slab has always been there. It serves as support for the elevator shaft, which goes down the middle. Originally, the slab was left blank. Early 2010s, new owners moved in here, and they noticed that architecture tours were not talking about their building on the tours, and they wanted to do something to change that. So they spent $800,000 by 2014 to put a giant map on the side of the building, and the red dot in the middle is a "You Are Here" dot. So it's shaped like their building, exactly where it is along the water, so now we talk about their building, they got their way. And if anyone says money can't buy happiness, just point to 300 South Wacker and tell them they were wrong. They got their way. Now our right side, this is the old post office of Chicago. You might actually recognize that building as a popular filming location. If you've ever seen the Batman trilogy by Christopher Nolan before, the opening bank heist scene in Batman The Dark Knight was filmed on top of and inside this building, specifically to the bottom right corner in the technology lobby. Now, in reality, this was the post office. It was completed back in 1921, then it had expansions throughout the years. So by about 1932, it becomes the largest post office in the world. That was mostly to keep up with demand for the mail-in order catalog industry, which has been a huge part of Chicago's economy for so long. Pioneered at the time by companies like Montgomery Ward, and Sears as the two key players. But that meant that this building was in full operation until it closed about 1996, and then it just remains closed for many years. Nothing was done with it. That was until new investors got a hold of the property, put in $900 million to do a full renovation of that building, and turned it into new and updated offices. Yeah. And then they opened up their doors for business in 2019, which turned out to be a terrible year to open up new offices in Chicago. We had to get through some stuff. The good news is it's one of the few structures that's been able to almost fully bounce back post-pandemic. Very close to full capacity, very successful project in the city, housing companies like Uber Freight, Walgreens, PepsiCo, and many more. Now, all the success that we see with that old post office is certainly not normal. And I say that because today we're actually reaching very close to 28% vacancy for our offices. Those are not good numbers. Now, granted, we have had this problem with a lot of companies moving out of Chicago. Some of these older offices have been turned into things like residential. Others have been kind of converted or renovated. A lot of companies who have held on have done a lot of renovations in recent years to try to entice people back into working in an office. We've seen some mixed results there. One area we have seen a key improvement is actually in terms of retail. So the Magnificent Mile, or Michigan Avenue, big shopping area, that is blowing up. I mean, it's huge in popularity right now, reaching very close to pre-pandemic numbers. Might have just surpassed that.